Good morning, and welcome to the January 24th edition of the Centennial ROE Workshop. Today, we're going to walk you through return on equity and how our clients use that to make better investment decisions. Our regional director, Tom Watkins, is going to be joined by Trevor Henson of Beachfront Property Management, who's their Chief Innovation Officer. And then our regional director, Edan Shalom, will be joined by Joel Simaie of Versa Capital to talk a little bit about the lending market. The first thing we're going to do today is talk about return on equity and how our clients use that to their advantage to make good, solid investment decisions. So what we're going to do, we offered, you have the link to grab a copy of our ROE worksheet, get a calculator and a pencil, and we'll get started. The first thing that we'd like you to do is write down what you think your return on your investment is for one of your properties. So pick one of your properties today. It can be any one of them. It can be one you bought 5 years ago, 25 years ago, an industrial building, a shopping center, an apartment building, doesn't matter. But pick one of the properties that you own where you got a good idea of exactly what the numbers are. And we're going to work through helping you determine exactly how your property is performing today. The great part about this process is that it's unique to each individual investor. How long you've owned it impacts it, what your current debt situation is, depreciation basis, as well as price you paid, and your property taxes. So each individual California investor's situation can be used for their own return on equity. And how our clients use it is we use it to see, is now the property performing as best as my investment dollars can? And oftentimes what our clients find is that maybe there's things about the property, the location, something about it that they don't enjoy. And they realize that when they look at the financial performance of the property, they could be doing better in something a little bit different. So we're going to walk you through that process today. We're going to use a sample property from one of our clients that we'll use on the screen. And then we ask everybody who's here in the room with us to use your own numbers. So again, if you haven't wrote down what you think your current rate of return is for the equity in your property, please write that down on a piece of paper and we'll come back to that later. So the first thing that we're going to do when we go through this process is we put in some basic property information. So the number of units, which in this case will be 24. This is an apartment building for a client in Long Beach, long-term owner. They bought the property in 1974. So really, really low property taxes. You go down here, you put the year built. In this case, it's 1947. The building square footage is 14,220, 1947 there, perfect. Now down here, 14,220. You can approximate these. Most people don't know the exact building size or their lot size. And then the lot size was 9583. So just some basic property information that we'll use later. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over here to the income summary. We don't need by each individual space. All we're looking for is your monthly rental income will go in this first column under current. So in this case, it's going to be $34,135. Pretty good income on 24 units. And they make about $200 in some additional income. So this gives the total monthly income. You'll see it's auto-populated over here to what your annual income is. So you want to make sure that when you put your total monthly income, it looks like what you think you made in 2022 on the property. So we get our income in there because that's obviously where it starts. And now we get into some of the expenses. We've got a basic list here. We'll highlight it, or we'll go through just a couple things. For legal, we've got $8,000. For advertising, $840. Now, if you've got some different stuff, like for example, this one has a pool. If you don't have a pool, but you got something else, you put it in there, whether it's common area charges and things that you ultimately get reimbursed for by the tenants, or if you got something different at an apartment building, it'll all go there. The landscaping, $2,400. Pest control, $2,200. We'll get rid of pool and just use, maybe make that miscellaneous. And we've got 5,000 there. Now, on the repairs, one of the things about repairs is that sometimes owners include capital expenditures when they've got to go in and remodel or redo a unit, or they've got a new tenant and they spend some money on tenant improvements. Those are capital reserves or capital investments that we'll put in here, and we'll use kind of an annualized number for those things. This is just the reoccurring maintenance and repairs. And so in this one, we'll put in 24-unit property. I believe their number was about 11,500, which typically repairs and maintenance, whether you manage the property yourself, do the repairs yourself, or hire a management company, usually come in anywhere from about $450 to $750 a unit on a multifamily property. On the electric, we've got 4,000. $7,200. They gave us another number, which was $7,200. The water at $3,600. Now, in reserves, because sometimes you put a roof on and sometimes you don't, what we do is we take out what does things like that cost? New windows, a remodel, a roof, redoing the parking area. And we look at what do those things cost and how long do they typically last to come up with a reserve budget. So a reserve budget typically for an apartment building is about $300 per unit. So we're going to use $7,200 there. And now we're going to get into some of the variable costs, right? Property taxes. In California, one of the great things about California is Prop 13. And if you've owned property a long time, your taxes are really low. In this case, this client's property taxes were $13,508. And then this last line, we'll talk about property management. Now, we work with a lot of clients who sit down and meet with us, and they talk about, well, I manage the property myself. Well, in all truthfulness, most of the clients we work with, what they made at their business was probably more than what most property managers make. And so there's a value of the time. So we always want to account for the fact that there is cost in operating property that has turnover and maintenance issues that are not all paid by the tenants. Obviously, if you have a triple net lease, this is a little bit different. But in this multifamily property, between the management fee and the on-site management, which they have to have at a 24-unit building, the property management was $39,801. And you can see we've got all of the expenses at $112,000, includes current property taxes. So the last two things we do is we look at basis and depreciation, and then we'll obviously put the market price on the property. So as we look at basis and depreciation, I said they own the property since 1974. For multifamily property, you get 27 and a half years of straight line depreciation off your original basis. Their original basis was next to nothing, and they've used all that depreciation. So their remaining basis is zero, and their annual depreciation is zero. Before we get to the price, we go to the current loan situation. And this varies for owners. Depends on how much you owe, depends on your rate. All those things factor into it. In this case, because they'd owned the property for so long, they had no debt on the property. So no loan, no current payment. Now, oftentimes when we meet with owners, the thing that we hear all the time is that I'm making so much money, there's no way I could make more money with another property because I have no debt and my property taxes are low. And we'll see how that shakes out here in a second. So the price of this property is $6,490,000. Compute some numbers. And now as we look at the return for the client, we'll start right here. We bring in $412,000 in scheduled gross income. We used a vacancy rate of 5%, very typical and standard. It's really not that much time of having a vacancy at a unit or two was $20,000. Now we used their actual expenses that they gave us, including their low property tax number, to get $112,449, leaving them a net operating income of $278,970. Now remember, this client, no debt. That contributes to how much money they're making. So on our loan payments, we have zero. So based on their income of $278,970 before they pay any state or federal income tax, the $278,970 was the most they'd ever made on the property in any given year. But on their $6.4 million in equity, they were making a 4.3% return on their money. Now, oftentimes our clients are shocked by this number, but it's really the value of investing in real estate. They might have paid a couple $100,000, maybe even $1 million for a property, but owning it for 10, 15, 20 years, they build up so much equity, and their depreciation is based on that original purchase price, that their returns are usually anywhere from 3 to 5%. But that's pre-tax. The other part that we said we would factor in to really help somebody evaluate how great their property is doing is the impact of state and federal income taxes. So we go down here, and the way that it works, you take your cash flow plus any principal reduction. That's what you get taxed on. In this case, we got the cash flow, which was $278,970. They've got no principal reduction because they don't have a loan. Now, the depreciation, the way depreciation works is however much depreciation you get to shelter that, or you get to shelter that income, and it's not taxed. In this case, all of their income gets taxed. Because of the tax bracket they're in, that $278,970 becomes $97,000 in income tax. So their after-tax cash flow becomes $181,331, which is only a 2.79% return. And I'll say this one is only a 2.79% return. In 2022, 75% of the ones that we did with clients were even lower than this. So oftentimes our clients that have owned these properties for a long time, they've built up all this equity, are really making somewhere between 1 and about 3% on their money. They oftentimes have an older property, 1947. They've got a lot of management. If it's a multifamily property, if it's a multi-tenant commercial investment. Or they may have lived in one spot and raised their children and have now moved to a different location, and the kids are in 3 different states. And they've moved to the desert or somewhere different, and they still own this property that's far away, that might be more heavily taxed than other options. And so we walk our clients through these numbers and get them to look at, okay, how is my property really doing today? And then what are their other options? And the neat part about what we do and the opportunities we have to help our investors is that there are so many different options. Newer property, closer to home, make me more money, give more to my kids. I want to, donate all of my real estate to this organization, and I want it to be as much as it can be because I really believe in it. All those things are available to people when we start to look at the numbers and see performance. So that's one return on equity example. The last thing I'd say for anybody watching this webinar is that it happens sooner than you think. It can happen in as short as 5 to 7 years for somebody where their equity is not earning as much as it possibly could. And that they can then take their equity and redeploy it. We've seen clients effectively use a 1031 exchange 3 or 4 times over a 40-year ownership period to almost a 10x multiplier the cash flow that they made had they kept their original property and the equity that they had built up by effectively utilizing exchanges when their return on equity number could be better, they could get better performance on that equity in an additional property. So we wanted to keep the return on equity part short because we've got a lot of other cool stuff that we want to cover with you today. So we're going to take a short break and get set up. And we're going to hear a little bit about RUBS programs and some of the things that Trevor has seen on the management side that'll help owners make smart decisions with their property.
Thank you for that, Justin. Hi, I'm Tom Watkins. I'm here with Trevor Henson. Trevor's with Beachfront Property Management. Trevor's been in the industry 15 years. I've known Trevor at least 5 of those years.
Yeah.
So this is great. It's great to sit down with you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
And look forward to this. Do you want to tell a little bit about Beachfront and yourself briefly?
Well, no one really wants to hear about that, right? Property management is not the most interesting. We're just here to, all we do is help our owners make more money. So about me, about Beachfront, I'm Trevor Henson. I'm the partner and CMO of Beachfront Property Management. We've been in business for 22 years. And we make lives better through property management. That is our core focus and our core business model. And we do that by making the lives better of clients and making the lives better for our tenants. How's that?
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. We're obviously, Justin put on a good show talking about NOI. One thing that can really improve NOI is a RUBS program.
Yes.
Can you just...
ratio utility billing.
Yeah, well, we'll start out. Just what is a RUBS system and just explain to the viewers.
Well, a RUBS system, it's an acronym, RUBS. It stands for Ratio Utility Billing System, or sometimes people say Ratio Utility Billing Service. Depends on who you ask. What it is, it's a program that's been around for a very long time. And it seems that not many people know about it except for the institutional, like the REITs and the private equity firms of the world. What it does is puts the expenses that we normally pay as landlords, the water, the sewer bill, the trash bill, common area pest bill, and in some cases, the gas bill for the water heater, and if it's master metered for electric or master metered for gas, those bills as well. The service divides up the bill based on how many tenants are in each unit and puts all of the bills back onto the tenant. So instead of you paying 100% of the water, or you paying 100% for sewer, and you paying 100% for trash at your buildings, now you're going to pay 80% of the water, 80% of the sewer. You're not going to pay. You're only going to pay 20%. Excuse me. The tenants are going to pay 80%. The tenants are going to pay 100% of the trash. The tenants are going to pay 100% of the pest control, and the tenants are going to pay probably 70 to 80%, depends on the jurisdiction, of the master meter gas for the hot water heater. The numbers are different if you have like an old 1920s bricker that has like a master meter electricity or master meter gas. You can rub that as well. It can increase. I've seen it even in the case study I presented here. We had a 106 unit building. It can increase your NOI by 1 to 3 points. Once you have full penetration, meaning all tenants are on the RUB system.
Wow. So you're eliminating almost all of your expenses. Obviously not property taxes, but it seems like you can kind of...
can reduce them significantly. The larger the building, the more effect it has.
So I guess the question is, why isn't everybody doing this? Is it expensive up front? What's the timeline?
Very good question. I've been out there evangelizing RUBS. I think one of it starts with awareness. I don't believe that a lot of owners know that there's even such a thing. 2, there's a barrier to entry. If you own for instance, I own a 5-plex in Hawthorne. I cannot call at least not to my knowledge, and I've tried prior to being with Beachfront. You can't call them to get RUBS placed on the building. They want it on new construction. RUBS companies do. They want it on 1,000 unit portfolios. They want it on usually north of 50 units, and they want it to be on luxury properties so that it makes sense for them and there's a lot of contractual paperwork, and you got to do building by building. You can't get a blanket contract. And it's a lot of bureaucracy involved with it. And you don't know if the companies are good or bad, and they have weird acronyms like MUX and YES and that are these companies that you wouldn't even understand what they did if you saw their website. You have to have someone explain it to you because you're like, what is it? So trying to simplify the concept is been one of the one of my challenges, what I've been trying to do and explain with my broker teams and my friends, we don't broker at beachfront. So we have a lot of broker referral relationships, a lot of friends, like here at Centennial, and Tom, to make people aware that this is actually something that can be done. And it should be done because it's a way around rent control. We can't raise the rents or we can't evict, but there is no utility control. We can still, we'll talk about non-RSO versus RSO units as well. But this is definitely nothing this is not something AB 1482, which is California state rent control, has no dog in the fight on. No, it does not regulate RUBS. There is no RUBS regulation.
Gotcha. So it sounds like there's a few specialized companies that do this.
They are.
Beachfront doesn't do it. So you guys would go to a third-party contractor, which would then come into a building and perform what they do. I'm assuming you guys have the relationships with them to get it.
Yes, a third-party contractor you can do RUBS by yourself. Like if you want to read sub-meters individually and you want to go do that, there are ways to do that. I don't advise it, and I couldn't explain how that would be because it would be very tedious, and then you bring the liability on yourself if it's read wrong or billed wrong. We use a third-party company called YES, which is Yardi Energy Services. They are a subsidiary of Yardi that we have through much negotiation and work with, we have a beachfront. When I say beachfront property management has a blanket agreement with them that any property we bring in, we can put RUBS on. So if it's a 8-unit, we can put RUBS on it. We do it as a matter of procedure, policy. When you onboard, we put RUBS on your building unless you don't want it.
Gotcha. And is there like a basic, say you've got a 2-bedroom apartment building, is there a basic cost per unit? Or what's like a good criteria to give it?
Good question. What is the cost per unit, or like a rule of thumb for for RUBS? The rule of thumbs that we use, and who figures that out? The provider, the energy provider, the RUBS provider. You give them your rent roll, you give them all your utilities and expenses that they're going to try to rub back, and they'll tell you based on what their legal team says, based on the jurisdiction and the laws and the codes for that county, state, and city, what you can bill back, and you follow that. So the liability is on them, and they bill the tenants. It doesn't cost the owners anything, and what you can forecast, and what we use for modeling buildings for acquisition, 80% of water and sewer can be billed back. So you only pay 20 for common area water and sewer. 90 to 100% of your trash, which are usually your two biggest line items.
Right.
And when it comes to the gas, that's a question mark. If you have one gas meter for one hot water heater for the boiler for the place, you can bill back, I believe, 80% of that as well.
Gotcha.
So it's 80% for water sewer, 80% for gas on hot water heater, and 90 to 100% on waste removal. And the concept is that the landlord probably uses 20% of the water in the common area to water the lawn, water the landscaping, etc. But he doesn't use any of the trash.
Right.
Tenants use 100% of the trash service. So that's kind of what you're putting back on them. And it's based on how many tenants are in each unit. So it's based on a fair program. And it seems like a lot, but when in tenant statements, it sounds like an extra $20, $30 to them, to which we've yet to have people move out on.
So you mentioned, does this look different if I have a building in Long Beach compared to a building in San Pedro? Each city is different, or
if they're RSO.
Okay.
So if they are under any kind of rent control, like LA City, West Hollywood, Santa Monica. Well, let me take that back. If it's under Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Culver City, or Inglewood, just forget about RUBS, because they're going to make you take it out of your total rental amount. It's not illegal, but they made it so hard to do so that.
Can you repeat that one more time? What cities?
Santa Monica.
Yep.
West Hollywood, Culver City now with their new rent control, and Inglewood with their new rent control.
Interesting. All right.
What they've done is they put provision in there that says RUBS is part of the rental payment, or that utilities, if you're going to include them or have tenants pay them, they must be included in the original rent price. So if you're going to advertise $2,000 a unit and you want someone tenants to pay $50 for their utilities, you got to advertise it as $2,050, which doesn't stop the tenants from using 10 times the amount of water they would if they were paying for their home bills.
Gotcha.
That's
That makes sense. Okay, so here's an example. I've got a building. The tenant's in there right now, living there. Can I go in there, or do I have to wait until you're rehabbing the unit to put in a RUBS? Like, can you go in tomorrow to your tenant and say, hey, we're implementing this system. We're going to be doing work, and you're going to start paying me?
Where's your building located?
Let's do 2 scenarios. So one will be Downey, and one will be rent control South Los Angeles.
Rent control South Los Angeles. Okay. So the Downey, the Downey one, let's make an assumption. Let's assume that all tenants are on month-to-month leases in Downey. Mm-hmm. In this case, you would come in with a 60-day notice. Say you're requiring it the day after you close. The very next day, you could post 60-day notices of change of terms that say the owner's no longer paying for water, sewer, trash, pest control, or common area gas, and you're implementing a RUB system. Here's the contact for them. Here's what's going to be happening. You're going to be getting a bill via email with your rent statement, how much you owe for rent, as well as your line item for water, sewer, pest control, and trash. It's going to look like $10, $4, $8, $2 in line item. So it ends up being $20 to $30 per person to pay for their share of the utilities.
So it sounds like they're
for Downey. So you can, in 60 days, we usually say 90 because it's a little bit of setup. Within 90 days, you can be up and running 100% RUBS in Downey situation.
And the systems will be in place in that time?
Systems will be in place in that time.
Okay.
Because we set it up. It's already set up at Beachfront. Now, that's the difference. It's hard to do on your own. That's I think what the big barrier of entry with it. And other property management companies, I haven't come across any. Forgive me, other property management companies out there, if you guys are able to implement automatically. I haven't found any that do yet. They can, and when we test market, they say they will, but they'll do it individually, and not as a blanket program. For us, it's like we manage 12,000 doors.
Right.
So it's as if we have a 12,000 unit building, and that's how he already treats it with us. So we just cost the owner nothing.
Is there pushback from tenants?
The only pushback we get are from the tenants that have really low rents, and they end up moving out, which is typically what we want them to do anyway. Most of our buildings are value add plays. So if they need to move out because of an increase of $30, then it's not the place usually for where we are for our clients, and the clients are gonna get someone in there that's gonna be able to pay that anyway. But there's never been with vacancy rates so low, 2%, 3% still, the extra $30 a month, we haven't seen anybody. I've never seen a mass exodus, and I've only seen a couple of people move out because of it, and typically they were the ones that the owner wanted to be moving out. Cool.
I think that's all I have for you, unless you want to add anything else that you think I may have forgot.
Let's see. The thing about RUBS is it's not just for institutional. I think that's the big takeaway. If you have 16 units and above, you could have RUBS on it. If you just have to find the property management company that can do it for you, because it's a big old pain in the butt. I've tried to self-implement a couple of times for different people, and a lot of paperwork, even if the company can take you on. Find a property management company, or call Beachfront Property Management Company. I don't know, shameless self-promotion here, but that can do it for you without charging you anything. It should not cost you as a landlord anything to implement RUBS. The whole point is to cost the building less and save you. It's called bottom line strategies to increase your NOI.
Nice. Well, you shared with me the case study on the larger unit.
Yes.
We'll share that with the viewers after this. But I appreciate your time, and
thank you, Tom.
Thank you, listeners.
Welcome back. Edan Shalom here with Joel Simaie of Versa Capital, founder and principal. Versa Capital provides commercial real estate financing and advisory services for owners for a couple decades now or so.
10 years. But
10 years. So previously with
while.
Lehman Brothers, George Smith Partners, Investment Services.
Correct.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So considering that active investors and people in the commercial real estate world know that the largest partner is generally the bank. What do you see going on right now in this new environment?
Well, it's been an interesting beginning of the year for 2023. Everybody who's in real estate knows that, obviously rates have shot up. And it's not so much that the interest rates have gone up, it's the velocity that's caused this havoc in the system right now. From the lending perspective, I feel, at least this year now, we've kind of plateaued in terms of where rate range is for, let's take apartments. Year ago you were at 3%. Today you're at high fives to maybe low sixes, depending on maybe a mid five if you're doing an agency loan. But you have this kind of range that you can at least focus on. And, when I look at this relative to the financial crisis, to me, it's very different. Financial crisis, there was no liquidity. Banks had no money. Today, banks have money, but they just choose to not lend it out for various reasons. It could be some liquidity issue they may have, or they're just trying to wait to see what happens with this entire rate environment. So, this end of this month, we're going to have the Fed meeting. They're going to probably raise rates another 25 basis points. Everybody knows they're just trying to curb inflation. So if, Fed's goal is to get this system under control. And the only mechanism they have is to increase interest rates. And so we'll see. I think this year is going to be choppy, but there's money out there for the right borrower, for the right property, if the borrower is willing to take on a little bit more extra, monthly payments because the rates are high.
So how then has underwriting changed?
So the economics and the metrics of how you would underwrite a deal hasn't changed. What has changed is the loan amount that a borrower was able to get before was much higher than today. So the metrics, whether it's the debt coverage you're looking at or the debt yield that they would use to underwrite a deal, that hasn't changed. But because interest rates have shot up so much, you might look at an apartment deal, let's say today, and you might end up at a 45% loan to that purchase price, which effectively tells you the borrower has to come up with 50-55% equity.
Mm-hmm.
So again, metrics haven't changed, rates have changed, causing the lower loan amounts. And where I think where we have the issue now, and I think this year will be the year we'll see is, will owners of properties adjust their prices down? We're seeing slightly in different markets that there's definitely some adjustment, but nothing that's that significant yet. So we'll just have to play it out this year and see where it goes.
Interesting. Where do you see more activity, I guess, in which asset type do you see a lot more activity these days with where maybe the banks are more interested in looking at deals?
I don't think any of them are really that active, to be honest. This year it's been, you talk to any lender today, their pipeline is down. And so the activity is there. It's just it's nowhere like what we had, a year ago. Multifamily, it's still something that people want. The different markets though, right? So I think I've always seen multifamily as being the most active, and that's because there's still always liquidity in the marketplace for that asset type. You look at retail, you're not going to see much activity there. There are some because there's conversions going on. Hospitality is something there where it's actually has picked up. So a lot of people are buying hospitality. Some of them are keeping it as hotels. Others are converting into residential. And that's actually been a successful plan for some clients that I've worked with. And but as far as multifamily as an asset type, which Centennial focuses on, I would say it's an asset type you'll always have liquidity for. And mainly not necessarily just because of banks, because you've got the agencies, Freddie and Fannie, and they're mandated to support that.
Interesting. I think in the brokerage community in general, for the last umpteen months or however many months it's been now, we hear a lot of buyers that have been kind of pausing, looking, saying things like, I'm waiting to see where this market goes. Do you think we've kind of seen where it's gone, or do we now have a new normal to be able to operate in comfortably from your viewpoint?
It's not. I would say it's a new normal for this point in time. There's still going to be some. We need 2023 to kind of see where things go. It's kind of the tale of, you've got the market and then you've got the Fed, and these two right now are trying to figure out, because when you look at where Treasuries are today at 3.5%, that says a different story versus where the Fed is trying to push the Fed funds rate to get to that 5.25, kind of their terminal rate, which is their goal. Right now we're about 4.25. So it's kind of the tale of two different, the Fed versus the market. I think from a lending perspective, we have a pretty good sense of what the range is right now. But again, it goes back to the owners of properties. If they don't have to sell, they're not going to sell. If they have to sell, they still have the mindset of a year ago. They haven't adjusted yet, but it's going to start happening, because this is my personal view, I don't think rates are going to ever go, not ever, I can't only say ever on anything, but I don't see it going back to the 2.75, 3%. But I think we're going to end up in this area that we're at right now, let's say the 5.5 to 6, in this kind of a range for a period of time. That's my personal opinion. And
so 5.5, 6, historically speaking, is that still a healthy market? It is.
I mean, it's not an unhealthy market, but the prices have to adjust to that.
So if I'm an owner and I'm not necessarily have to sell, but I want to do something, I want to make a move. Mm-hmm. Knowing now that we have an understanding of where this rate range should be, where should I, as an owner that's looking to sell, where should I consider adjusting my expectation to get something going and be able to adjust without over adjusting?
And that's where you guys come in to go to market and see what the market is pretty efficient. The market will tell the seller, if they're genuinely a seller, where it's going to clear. And so from a buyer's perspective, you might have different reasons. If somebody's in a 1031 exchange, they might do something that somebody who's not in the 1031 won't do. And what's happening is today we're not seeing as many 1031 acquisitions because things aren't selling as much, right? So the person that you're talking to as a investor, they're now looking at saying, okay, how would I invest in this property? What would be the right return based upon the current environment, right? So this is the pull and push between the seller and the buyers. And I think this is to me, I feel like this year is going to be more of a clearing year where we'll get some more adjustment. Somebody asked me the other day, like, what do you think is, prices you need to adjust to for it to make sense? It's a hard question to answer because, where's a property? I mean, if you got a property in Beverly Hills, people look at that very differently than if you're in Hollywood, West Hollywood, in the Tri-Cities, right? So, but I think I'm seeing adjustments in pricing. I'm seeing sellers who have to really get to the table and say, okay, you know what? We'll work with the buyer, with the right buyer.
Right.
And so that's starting to happen.
Okay. Is with multifamily and even commercial assets, are banks even looking at market rent and potential with everything in this current environment? I mean, is it a factor?
When you say market rent, I mean, what they're looking at is what's your actual rent,
right?
What are you currently getting? And then they're putting a lot of weight on what the appraisal comes back in at, because the appraiser is going to go out there and figure out what is the market rent. And sometimes, you'll see that deals are not getting the same market. The market rent the appraiser uses is not necessarily what the actual rent is. An interesting example, I was actually talking to a lender, property up north in the Bay Area. Their leases were $4,000 a month. Some of them that are coming due, they're getting released at about $2,800 a month. That's a big knock on your rent. But I would say, in good locations, so far I haven't seen rents going down. So I don't see that pressure yet. But, every day we see all these different things about tech companies, layoffs, this, that. So we'll see. But overall, they'll still look at what's the actual building doing, and then they'll look at the appraisal. There's a heavy concentration on what the appraisal is going to come back in at.
Great insight. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Great.